Give me a warm-up one. Okay. I was born Victoria Ann Kurth in New York City, New York, August 6th, 1950. I lived in New York for the first 3 years of my life, and then my parents moved back to Billings, Montana. Well, my childhood in Montana was pretty idyllic. I loved living with my grandparents when we lived at their house. I loved both of my grandparents a lot. My grandpa in particular was known as like the best babysitter ever because he would let you have treats and you could, I would lie on his chest and watch TV and fall asleep. I remember just going up and down with him. He'd fall asleep, then I'd fall asleep. We both would be there after having had some popcorn or grapes or something fun. When we left my grandparents' house, we really lived out in the country, and my grandpa had a lot of horses. I remember my dad and my grandpa taking me out to ride, which they thought was, I don't know, I'm not sure what they thought was going on, but they would have me riding around this big pile of manure, and I was just a little person. I was probably 4 or something, and if I slipped off the saddle, I landed in the pile of manure, which I thought was kind of stinky. I was not always that. Well, I'll say this, it made me want to stay on the saddle, so I stayed in the saddle. I probably only did that once and then never again. I wanted to share 2 of my favorite things. These were mugs that I actually made out of pictures that I really like a lot. And this is one of Scott and Nathaniel and me in front of, I think it's a whale tail. We'd just come back from a cruise in the Caribbean with the whole family, which was really, really fun. And it was a great memento of a family trip with 2 of my favorite people. It was really hard to have a date in my house. I was the oldest, and my brothers basically followed me around. It was this kind of a wild pack of 4 little boys and 2 dogs, and whatever other little boys in the neighborhood decided to join in. So anybody who ever dated me knew that they were going to have to deal with my brothers. And as I got older and the boys got older, that sometimes involved actually wrestling with them while I was getting dressed. They'd come in and the boys would start jumping on them, and they'd have to wrestle them in the living room until I came out. The boys were very much part of my life. I babysat them. And as you notice, I'm saying the boys because it was Vicky and the boys. But we would go up to the cabin and stay there for maybe 2 or 3 weeks, maybe a month at a time. Now, looking back on it, we just can't believe that she ever took us up there at all, because one day doing that would have been enough, but she was up there, we'd be up there at least a month, and Dad would come up on the weekends, and we would just spend the days, hanging out in the river, catching fish, catching snakes. The boys would catch snakes and frogs and put them in buckets and put them on the porch. And then we'd all go to bed, and the next morning they were all gone, and they'd work their way back down to the pond, so we'd go down to the pond and catch them. One of the things we loved the most about the Gallatin was going down it in inner tubes. And Mom insisted on going down it first because she didn't want us to do something that she hadn't done herself. One year the boys decided to drop a snake on me as I went under the bridge, which they thought was really funny. And fortunately for me, I'm not that scared of snakes, so it didn't bother me as much as they thought it was going to. But it's a story we still tell. And then as we got older, the boys started jumping off the bridge into the river. But I actually was never brave enough to jump off the bridge. I'm not a big fan of taking risks, as those who know and love me will attest to.
How did you meet Dad?
I met Skip at a mixer that they had for Radcliffe, Harvard, and Wellesley students at the beginning of our freshman year. He had literally pretty much just gotten off the plane, and he and his buddies and his roommates were looking through the picture book of the women at Radcliffe, and they found this girl they thought was pretty cute, and they were going to see if they could find her at the mixer. And so they went in search of, I think her name was Wendy, but I'm not sure. Anyway, off they went, and one of his roommates saw me and said, "Is that the girl?" And he said, "No, but I'm going to go get her number." So I was talking to 2 people that I knew, and I assumed that Dad knew one of them because I didn't think you just went up and talked to people who were strangers. Little did I know that that was actually the point of a mixer. But anyway, that's when I met him. So this is a picture of Skip that was painted by his Aunt Charmin. She was his mom's younger sister. And you can see by this painting that she really loved Skip and she understood him. And I think this picture really captures his essence. This was a painting that had pride of place in S and Fred's home. And I'm really pleased that I inherited it and that it blesses our house as well. How many times was I in love? That's an interesting question. I was probably, my first love was Pat Sweeney in high school. And then Mike McDonald, also in high school. Then my friend Lars in Sweden. And then Dad. Skip. And Skip was, I thought, my soulmate, my life's companion. And when he died, I didn't think I'd ever find anybody else that I would want to be with. And it was only when I'd been a single mom for 10 years, I guess, by that time. And Scott, who lived next door and was in my department, decided that I kind of, at that point, Nathaniel was about to graduate. And so I said to Skip, you got to help me do this, because if I'm supposed to get married again or do something else, I'm certainly not having any luck on my own. So you got to help. And if you think that's what should happen. So I kind of just left it. I had the thought and left it. And meanwhile, Scott, living next door, had been divorced for a couple of years and was beginning to feel like he didn't want to be single. And he had completely unbeknownst to me, I thought Scott didn't like me. I thought he thought I wasn't that smart, because he was really smart. But unbeknownst to me, he had considered me the gold standard of women. And before he married his first wife, he had said to himself, why can't I find somebody like Vicky? So he only told me that later, much later. But he decided that he was going to ask me out. So I went to the department meeting and I said, because I was on the board of the Fairfield Arts and Convention Center, and we were just having our first play called The Funny Thing Happened on the way to the Forum, and we were bringing in some Broadway players to supplement our local talent. And I really wanted to sell tickets, and I wanted lots of people to go and enjoy this, because it's a great venue that we've created for the community. So I went to the department meeting, at which point I was the chairman of the management department, and I said, who wants to go to the play? A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum. I was not asking for a date. So I came home and I got a phone call from Scott saying, well, I'll go to the play with you. I went. And we continued to go to things, but it was always on the basis of I paid for myself, and we were just two friends going to places together. Scott, on the other hand, had a different plan. He was definitely wooing me, but he was also a little gun shy from his first marriage. So he didn't want to move too fast. So it took about 8 or 9 months before he ever even kissed me. And at that point, I have to say, it was all over. And I realized I could fall in love again. And it turned out that there was something more. And I've really been fortunate to have two amazing men in my life. This is another favorite mug that I made out of a picture. And this is our dear little dog, Napongo. And he's drying himself off after a swim in the Gallatin. So it represents not only our dear sweet Limpongo, who was my butler, but also all the great times we had at the Gallatin River. So it's a really special mug.
Looking back at your life thus far, what are you most proud of?
Well, my son. Now I'm going to get weepy again. I'm very, obviously that is the thing I'm most proud of. That's my legacy to the world, is his life and whoever comes after him. But I'm also proud of the work that Dad and I did, research projects that we did, and the books that he wrote, because I was also part of that, supporting of him, being able to do those things. And my career as a teacher, it was very meaningful to me to have an impact on so many lives over so many years. I was a professor for over 40 years, and a lot of people came through my classrooms, and they were wonderful, and I learned so much from all of them, and made connections that some are my friends still. Sometimes I have children of my former students who come back as students at MIU. My favorite place I've ever lived, that would be, I could not say, because I've loved every place I've ever lived. If I could think of the least favorite place, I'm not sure I could even think of that. I love living in Sweden. I love living in New York. I love living in Greenwich Village when I was there. I love living in Boston. I love living at Wellesley. I love living in Cambridge. I love being in Montana, being at the cabin. I loved growing up in Billings. It was a beautiful place to grow up. I love living in Santa Cruz. I love living in Fairfield. I loved all the places I've lived, in Spain, and visiting Sydney in England, living in China. I've lived a lot of places, and fortunately, I've loved them all. So I don't think I'd say there's a favorite. I could go be in any of them again.
What do you wish you had spent more time doing, and what do you wish you had spent less time doing?
Probably could have eaten less ice cream. Although sometimes I think I could have eaten more ice cream. So I guess it could go either way. I spent a lot of time with good friends and with my family, and we took a lot of trips together. I had a balanced life. My advice, I guess, would be not to take my advice, but to trust yourself. Trust yourself. Don't settle.
What is one thing you know to be true?
Love is all there is. That's it. Love is all there is.